Welcome to HirePHD's Alternative Career Path Success Stories series. I am Dr. Connie Lin, Executive Director of HirePHD. I'll be your host today. Joining us today is Dr. Dawn Henwood, the founder of Clarity Connect. Welcome. We're so thrilled to have you as our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me here. Looking forward to the conversation.
First, I'll ask you to tell us more about yourself.
Sure. So I started my career as an English professor. I have a PhD in 19th century literature from the University of Toronto, but I very quickly discovered that I was too pragmatic to teach literature. So I segued into teaching communications in the academy, and I did that for about 6 years. Then I found that I wanted to be still more practical and have more of an impact. So I moved into working with adults and eventually into doing different kinds of consulting. So I have consulted as a learning designer, as a writer, a corporate communicator, and as a communications trainer. So right now, my company Clarity Connect is based in Moncton, New Brunswick. And we specialize in helping people with research knowledge convey that knowledge to people who are outside their zone of expertise in ways that enable them to clarify their ideas and really connect with those audiences at a deep level so they can drive change.
Sounds like your job is like an intersection between academics and the real world. Can you tell us more about that?
That's a really good way of putting it. My husband puts it well, I think. He says, I really like to play kind of with one foot in the academy and one foot in the world outside the academy. And, for me, when you talk about transitioning from academia into, let's say, the corporate world or another world outside the academy, for me, it hasn't been a once and done process. It's been more of a to and fro and back and forth. I have gone back and worked as a staff member doing experiential learning. I've gone back and done a little bit of teaching, and now I'm, going back doing consulting. So it's as if I never have really quite left that world, but I've discovered that the borderland kind of between is actually where I really like to play.
That's another interesting question that a lot of people will want to ask is what's the difference between being a professor teaching in university versus the job that you're doing right now, being almost like a broker between the two?
Yes, and some people would call what I do knowledge brokering, in fact. Often I end up describing what I do to some groups as knowledge mobilization. That's another kind of category I fit into. So many differences. I think one of the things for me is my work as a literary scholar was very rooted in cultural studies. So I always am very aware of organizational culture. And to me, it's a complete culture shift when you move from the academy outside. So when I'm in the academy, I feel like things are moving way too slowly and people are overthinking. And I want to say, can we please just make something happen? But then I find when I'm in a business boardroom, I'm the opposite. And I'm saying, could we please slow down and reflect a little bit? Can we do a little bit of research to see who else has done this before so we're not reinventing the wheel? Can we just take a little bit of time to think before we act? So I think it's completely different kind of cultural orientation in terms of time and in terms of, I guess, kind of attitudes towards kind of what is knowledge, what is authority, those kinds of questions.
I like what you mentioned about the pace. That's what I find too. It's the pace of academia versus the pace of business world, and it's very hard to reconcile, especially for people who first entered the business arena. How did you adjust yourself?
Yeah, I think I was fortunate in that I always was driven and I am impatient by nature. You know, they say that your your strength is your weakness and your weakness is your strength. They're two sides of the coin. So I think it helps that I was driven and impatient, but also just really kind of cluing in to the environment around me. Again, looking for those cultural signals. It's not unlike going to a different country. And that sense of time and the way communication happens can differ, you know, from industry, it can differ from company to company, it can differ from division to division within a large organization. About 15 years ago now, I had the opportunity to do some work in Africa, in Nigeria. And so that was an experience of, you know, true kind of cross-cultural experience. But those same skills that you would use going to a different country, trying, you know, reading up and figuring out what makes them tick and being prepared for their conventions and customs, that also applies when I go into a new organization. It's noticing, for instance, oh, when I messaged this CEO or I sent him an email, mine was 6 paragraphs and he wrote back in 2 lines. Okay, signal, you know, I need to be more concise. Or noticing, oh, I'm used to hour-long meetings in academia. Now I'm seeing that nobody in this organization ever suggests a meeting more than 30 minutes. So it's just kind of looking for those clues.
I really like that advice. I would like the audience like take notes of this one. Don't be afraid. You can learn the culture quickly by being observant, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, those are the skills that you pick up as a researcher, right? And it's like researching the organization before you go in. And as a consultant, you know, you're going from organization to organization. And so that's a skill that you're constantly practicing.
Dawn, when I met you, when I talked to you the first time, I'm just so inspired by how you come to be who you are today. Like I think many of our audience would want to be you. So I know you authored at least 2 books, and then can you tell us a story of how do you become an authority in these areas? Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It's I don't think any career is a straightforward path, and mine has had a lot of zigs and zags and ups and downs and you know, 2 steps forward, 1 steps back, 1 step back. But a constant thread for me has been the belief that I can write where I want to go. And that's a little bit backwards because in the world of advice to coaches and consultants, people will say, build up a body of work, practice for 5, 10, however many years, and then take the results of all the webinars you've delivered, all the projects you've delivered, and so on, and then turn those into a book. And again, being an impatient person, I actually have done the opposite. So when I knew that I wanted to transition into the corporate world, what I did was I wrote a textbook for IT professionals. And I was fortunate in that through my network, I had access to an editor at, of all places, Oxford University Press. And I didn't even go through a regular proposal process. I just said, hey, I've got this idea for a book because I'm teaching this class. There are no textbooks out there. What do you think? And because I was proposing a really slim book, it wasn't going to be color, it was going to be an easy project, the editor said, sure, why not? Um, and I wrote that book not thinking that I was going to have a career teaching communications 101 to computer science students, which is what I was doing at the time, but thinking that if I have this book, then if I go outside the academy, people will say, oh, she must be an expert. And that's exactly what happened, even though I didn't really feel like I was an expert. I'd been teaching this class for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. And had been interviewing some people and trying to find out kind of more about what it was like to work in the world of IT. But I wrote where I wanted to go. And then what happened was I got connected with someone who was running an e-learning company, and their a major client was a global consulting firm. And the opportunity came up to pitch a 12-week course in advanced writing to for IT consultants. And so this fellow and I had been chatting for a while, but we actually connected because he'd responded to a newspaper column I wrote. So that's again, like, kind of writing to kind of position myself in a certain way. So he said, look, I think this project would be perfect for you. You could come on board as a consultant for a year and do it. And so he brought me into this meeting. This was my first corporate experience, was exposure to a partner at a global consulting firm in the States, and then some senior leaders around him. This is my first business meeting, really. And but I showed up, and this is Dawn, who's been teaching this little unknown course in a school you've probably never heard of because they're in the States. I was like, here's Dawn Henwood, expert. She's written this book for Oxford University Press. So that's kind of been the story of my career, is kind of saying, this is where I want to go. I think I can write something that will show I know enough about it to do the job that needs to be done.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the writing process and any advice you could give us to maybe get their first book published?
Yeah, and I made the choice with both books to go with an established publisher. And I know there's a lot of evolving thinking now. And as I think about my next writing project, because it's now been a few years, time for something new, I'm not sure that I will go with a publisher again. At the time, I really wanted it because I thought nobody knows who Dawn Henwood is, but they will recognize the word Oxford, right? And at the time, I had another acquaintance who had connections with Thompson, Nelson, and said, why don't you go over here? Because you will sell a lot more books. You'll sell them into universities. And I said, I really don't care about that. I want the brand. I want the credential. So I guess that's the first decision to make, is to really think, what is it you're looking to achieve with this book? Are you looking to build credibility? Are you looking to make a lot of money? Are you looking to attract clients on the internet? Because the answer to those questions will shape whether you decide to go with a publisher or not. If you do go with a publisher, the same advice applies as would apply with an academic book, in that you don't write the whole thing and submit the whole manuscript. So you write a proposal for the book and submit a chapter or two, and then the editor will come back and they may say, this looks great, or they may say, could you make it a little bit more like this, or a little bit more like that. So and then I have found that actually working with the publisher has had the big advantage of giving me a deadline.
You mentioned the word knowledge mobilization. I don't know if that's my bias, but I think that word is that field is growing and is becoming hot. And could you explain more what it is, and then maybe how to get in? Anything you can share about this field?
Sure. And I should say that I am new to the field, but I feel like I've been doing knowledge mobilization my entire career. And so one of the challenges with this field is something called concept proliferation. I read that term somewhere, I can't remember where, and I thought, oh, that is exactly what the trouble is here. So there are actually, as you may know, more than 100 terms used to describe knowledge mobilization, which to my mind is the process of moving research from the lab or the library into the space where it can produce practical results. So that might mean translating research so that health practitioners can use it, or so that someone in a company can use it to make a new invention, or so that a policymaker can make informed policies. The field is absolutely exploding. what's really fascinating to me is that the field has really been engineered, I use that term consciously, by scientists, with really no reference at all to the humanities and to the long tradition in the humanities of the art of persuasion or rhetoric, which is really my area of specialty. So I work in this area of knowledge mobilization, but it's interesting because there's a lot of hyper professionalization, hyper specialization happening now. So people are getting certificates in knowledge mobilization and so on. But people don't really talk about communication as part of the knowledge mobilization process. So I've been having some really interesting conversations in which people who've been practicing knowledge mobilization for 10 or 15 years will say, I never thought about communication as part of the process. So for me, that is it's a challenge because I have to kind of educate the audience and help them understand that persuasion is how you get buy-in, it is how you get uptake. But it's also a huge opportunity because there's a gap there that I think I can help fill.
So is that what your company right now does? Can you, if that's the case, can you tell us more about it?
Yes. So that's exactly what I do. And I work with clients in a number of different ways, always very customized to what their need is. So for some clients, I will simply do some writing. So maybe they need to write an impact story describing recent research success, or they need an impact report or white paper or something like that. For other clients, I will do training. And my favorite way, because I think it's the most impactful way to work with folks, is through team coaching. And that means I roll up my sleeves and I work alongside the team, really as a mentor and a guide. So we are co-creating different communication products, and I weave into that co-creation process some coaching, some instruction, some group training sessions, and then at the end, I leave them with a toolkit so that they can take what they've learned and they can continue doing it. So it's building capacity while they are generating those products.
That sounds amazing. And then audience, if you're now intrigued and you want to check out Don's company, links are down below. And also the 2 books that Don wrote, also will link them down below as well. So check them out. Yeah,
Good,
so
thank you. And
yeah.
Clarity Connect puts on a free webinar every month as well. They're very student-friendly events, so students and job seekers are welcome.
then I want to ask more question about how is your day-to-day jobs like? I asked a lot of consultant who was a business owner. It's all vastly different. So could you share more?
It is so different. And one of the things I've been working on over the past 6 months or so is recognizing that I actually get to control what the week looks like. Because my first few years in business, I think I was very reactive rather than proactive. And so now I actually structure my week so that I have set times for writing content, which I post mainly on LinkedIn and my blog, having business development conversations, going to networking events, then actually doing the client work. One of the most surprising things for me on this journey has been recognizing that the amount of time I actually spend as billable hours is just a fraction of my week. Because what I do is knowledge work, I do have to spend a certain amount of my week learning. And then I spend time on marketing, writing content, again, writing to where I want to go, having conversations. So at the end of the day, I'm probably spending 25 to 35% of my work week actually doing direct work with clients.
If you were to advise the audience who are still exploring where they want to go, if they want to be you or not, or find another career path, what would you advise them? Like, sometimes I ask, oh, what's the pros and cons of your work, and then lead
Mhm.
into that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
If they're trying to make that decision, first thing I would say is make sure you're paying attention to your head and your heart. That's one of the things I've learned as a business owner, that really the job of a business owner is making decisions all day long. And so that's a skill that I've actually had to work consciously on doing. And for me, because I'm a very intuitive person, part of that process always has to be to say kind of, okay, what's the heart saying? Yes, there are pros and cons, and I can make a matrix and give it weighted numbers. I can do all kinds of things like that. But what are the two things, two aspects of myself saying? For me, it's when you're thinking about being a consultant for someone else, let's say, versus doing it for yourself, I think you really have to get clear on what's motivating you. You can make good money as a consultant working for a consulting firm. And I spent a lot of time as a consultant, as a learning designer, working with some of those big firms. Um, the reason I didn't choose to pursue that path is I didn't want to work 60 to 80 hours a week and do a lot of travel and so on. I wanted to have more control over my week. So increasingly what I'm realizing is that this path works for me because I do have that autonomy. Now, there's a whole lot of risk that comes with that. I won't pretend that there aren't a lot of sleepless nights, and it's continually having to market and sell yourself. So that is an area that I'm still kind of growing into. It's still not easy. I thought being a professor would be the perfect job because I'd never have to look for a job again, right? It's like tenure. Wow, this is amazing. This is a perfect job for somebody like me who's very introverted, doesn't want to think about branding and marketing. But at the end of the day, I've discovered that for me, it makes more sense to develop those skills and build up my confidence in those areas than to work for somebody else, because the autonomy, the ability to do things the way I think they need to be done, the ability to be creative, those are the things that keep me going along this path.
Well, now you trigger my curiosity again. So like the first 6 years, I heard business, especially in the first 2 years, really tough. And what did you do in the first 6 years? And now you're at a different phase. What's a phase look like?
Wow. Well, the phases, as I said, have been kind of up and down, two steps forward, two steps back. Like many business owners, I think, and initially, or many consultants, I would say, initially I had just a couple of big clients. So year one was really just two big clients. I didn't do a lot of business development. So then years two and three was scrambling, a lot of scrambling. Business grew quite rapidly. And I actually had a little bit of a team. I had hired an employee. And then this seems to be such a common journey. Then I burned out. And
Oh.
it turned out that I am really good at doing the work myself, but I didn't have any hiring experience or any management experience. So I did a terrible job hiring people, even picking interns. And then the employee just didn't pan out. So then the whole thing just kind of crashed. And then there was a time of rebuilding. And then I decided at one point I'd go back to the university and just do it part-time. So it's been kind of this up and down and up and down. So last September, I left my academic role, which was manager of experiential learning, and decided, okay, I'm going to take everything I've learned now through these ups and downs, and I'm really going to look at this differently and really try to create the lifestyle I want. And so that's been the journey over the past year. I've been a lot more intentional about the kinds of projects I take on, how much work I take on, and what my week looks like. Because it's great to think about those big goals, those big milestones you want to achieve, but we live minute by minute, day by day. And I wanted to kind of I wanted my calendar to reflect the kind of life that I actually want to live.
That is Oh, that just touches somewhere in my heart. And I resonate so much with what you said with my nonprofit startup journey. And it is like that, that crush. And it is the lesson here, like audience, is that also it's okay to go backwards and come back, right? It is
Yes.
totally okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's, and that has been one of the biggest learnings in leaving the academy, because the academy is really this place where perfectionism is really fostered, to me at least. And I can only speak to going through a humanities PhD, but it's so competitive, it's so cutthroat. You don't want to share this idea because somebody else might steal it, and there's not really a lot of room for error, right? But then when you move outside that and you move into the world of business and you start connecting with other entrepreneurs, whether they're solopreneurs or they have a huge team, people who are making their own way, it's really not uncommon to meet somebody who's been bankrupt, maybe more than once, right? And almost every entrepreneur I have talked to has said, I learned the most from my failings, and that's been such a hard journey to learn, I think, coming from my academic journey.
Next question, I'm shifting gear a little bit. Any transferable skills that you think that a PhD have that can become you?
I think any buddy with a PhD has research skills that they can apply outside of their kind of home discipline. And they also have the ability to think critically. And that, has become such a cliche term, critical thinking. I can remember hearing a CBC show a while ago, and it was somebody talking about starting a career in construction. And she talked about how her critical thinking skills were serving her really well on the job. And what she really meant was her problem solving skills. So that this term, critical thinking, it's used in K to 12. It's used like in every area. Everybody says they have critical thinking skills. But to me, critical thinking means you can think about your thinking. And as a literary scholar, what I learned to do was to look at a text through one lens, say, okay, let's look at this through, psychoanalysis. Okay, what's that look like? Oh, switch the lens. Let's look at this through the historical context. What's it look like now? Let's switch the lens. Let's look at this through feminist theory. And so that ability to think critically is often what determines how successful you are as a consultant. It will separate you from the pack.
And turning the plate a little the other way around, any advice for the employers who are watching this, maybe have thinking about hiring PhDs or on the fence of hiring PhDs? What advice would you have for them when they hire PhDs?
I think it's to be open to getting to know the person and exploring kind of what they are capable of outside of their specialty. So technically, my specialty is 19th century American literature by women. What on earth does that have to do with what I do today? So when I'm working with someone who has a background in AI or life sciences or whatever, and I'm helping them translate their research into something that resonates with a lay audience, I will often say, I'm completely unqualified for this work, right? On paper. But I have been fortunate through my career to find those people who were willing to take a chance on me and say, gee, maybe somebody who knows how to do archival historical research and look up articles on various topics could also help with such and such, with market research or with it. So I think it's a lot of employers have lousy interview skills. So I think it's really, designing the interviews so that you can give the person kind of a chance to open up and explore together what they might be capable of.
Finally, like, is anything else you want to add to tell the audience? Any final advice you want to give us?
If I could give advice to my younger self, to the self that was first thinking about leaving the academy, I would say to her, be bolder. You know more than you think you know. One of the, I think, kind of hazards of having kind of started your career in the academy is that it's really easy to think, I don't know anything unless I know everything. So I worked on a 19th century author who was dead. And so my job in doing my dissertation was to read not just some of what had been written about her, but to read every single thing that had been written on this author to, up to the date of my dissertation. And fortunately, I did have friends in the program, and they said, oh, they work on a living author. It's like, oh man, they just published something. It's going to be another few months before I can defend, right? But so I was lucky, I guess. I had this kind of historical window to look at. And in the corporate world, that is so much overkill. And it has taken me a long time to get to the point to recognize that even if I haven't read 10 books on this subject, if I've read one book and I'm able to connect that with some personal lessons I've learned from my experience, then I have something to share. I have something worthwhile to share. You may notice the owls in my background here, which are a good reminder that it's not just about intellectual knowledge, it's about wisdom. And I think, again, it's so easy to undervalue what you have to offer in the corporate context or the not-for-profit context.
Thank you so much, Dawn, for your stories and words of wisdom. If thank you. I would like to clap. Usually, when we are doing live events, I spend way more time than I anticipated to talk to you because I just have so many questions. Thank you. And audience, if you like today's episode, if you want to hear more about career journeys, please click like and subscribe down below. We'll be back with more videos to help you with your career transition. So thank you again, Dawn, and we'll see you soon.